A warm welcome to all of you. I'm sure it's been a full day. No doubt there's a lot that's been shared, which will require a lot of processing perhaps. But please hold that for now because we have one more panel. And this, I'm sure, promises to be a very stimulating time of sharing and discussions. I'm asked to remind all of you, I'm sure you've heard it at least 4 or 5 times today, but the format is going to be as follows. We will have the panel members share one after another, actually in the order that they're seated, just so to minimize any confusion, right, as to who's who and who's speaking about what. Beyond that, I really hope to have more time towards the end where we can have more interaction, more dialogue, more Q&A, so that we can go deeper and tap into the expertise of the various panelists. The format we're going to adopt today is we're going to ask if you have questions, please write them down, and they'll be collected and brought to us here, where we will look at and try to sort out select the ones that will probably address areas of most interest. So if you can, I'm sure there's pen and paper where you are. Please write down the questions, and someone will collect the question sheets from you, and we'll proceed after all the panelists are finished to address those questions. So without further ado, I'm going to make a quick introduction. I'm sure you all have the bio and the background to each of the speakers today. So I'm not going to waste valuable time to do that again, but merely just to introduce very quickly the panelists that we have. So if I can start from the far end, we have Professor David Ibbotson or Ibbotson? Ibbotson, sorry. So I should have clarified that ahead of time. From Cambridge, quite a ways away to come, but he is at Cambridge, and we'll talk about social responsibility through international partnership. I'll leave it at that. I'll keep it brief so we can quickly run through. Second panel member, we have Dr. Amanda McBride from Washington University, St. Louis. I've actually been there once. And she also will be talking about how to institutionalize civic mission for higher education. Third, we have Professor Yu Sun from Yonsei University in Korea. And he will be talking about, well, very comprehensive, national education, social responsibility, and national competitiveness. I think we've seen how Korea has been actually very deliberate and very strategic in how they have been tackling not just electronics market or auto market, but even the cultural market. So that's something we can look forward to learning about. And finally, last but not least, we have Professor Hao Li from Stanford University. He actually has some very concrete examples where the SEED institution for innovation at Stanford has been practicing since 2013. So again, without further ado, I'm going to ask Professor Ibbotson if you're ready to take the podium and share. Let's give them a warm welcome.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you to PolyU for extending this invitation to me. I bring greetings from Clare Hall, one of the colleges in the University of Cambridge, one of its newest colleges, one of its smallest colleges, its most international college, and its college for graduate students. Cambridge is, of course, one of the oldest universities in the world. It's just passed its 800th anniversary. And as well as that, by inclination, I'm a historian. So when I was asked to talk about social responsibility in Cambridge, my obvious starting point is what the founders of the university more than 8 centuries ago would have thought about it. And the answer to that question is simple. They would have said it was obvious that universities had a social role, had social responsibilities, and they would probably wonder why anybody in the world would ever have thought it worthwhile to wonder about that question. Why ask whether universities have social responsibility? Universities then trained priests. The masters in the universities preached. They ministered to the poor, they ministered to the sick, and there could be no greater social responsibility than that. Today, of course, it is different. From the 18th century, universities like Cambridge began to see their role primarily in the formation of the mind, something undoubtedly valuable, undoubtedly virtuous, but possibly more valuable and more virtuous for the individual than for society. Mastery of the Greek and the Latin classics, mastery of mathematics, were at the heart of what the university aimed at. Eventually, by the end of the 19th century, the older universities had caught up with the new science. They were looking at physics and things of that sort. And they began to teach and do research in that area. It was virtuous and valuable again. But again, the social benefit was coincidental rather than a central element in what was being done. I would guess that there can have been few more socially significant pieces of work done in the universities of the 20th century than the identification of the structure of DNA in Cambridge in the 1950s. I might have to give precedence to the University of Manchester for the development of the electronic computing machine after the last war. Although there was no immediate social benefit in either of these, and I doubt whether the discoverers and developers of these gave a great deal of thought to the social implications of what it was that they were doing. But I think that may well not be the university of today, but the university of yesterday. In the Cambridge of today, I begin to hear two slogans or two mantras which impact on our theme at this conference. One, making a difference, just as Professor James Thompson from the University of Manchester had on his slides earlier this afternoon. Universities are coming to recognise that they can have a transformative role, whether it be in the redressing of social inequalities, educational inequalities, or racial inequalities. Universities are coming to see that the research that they do may have a practical relevance in the immediate timescale. And they may even pursue that research precisely because it has such practical relevance. Not all research is like that, of course. I don't actually think that mine is. But even the purest of research and teaching is of great worth in the modern world in instilling values into our students, criticising accepted wisdom, and following evidence, even if that evidence leads in unexpected and sometimes undesired directions. The second slogan or mantra which I hear in Cambridge is, I quote, the philanthropic universities. Universities like Cambridge have always depended on philanthropy to ensure their survival. But it's only in the modern world, I think, that universities have come to recognise their own reciprocal duties and powers to give back to the community and the world through their own activities. Within my own faculty, the Faculty of Law, for example, the skills and experience of my colleagues in the field of policing have been used in the training of advanced police officers in India. And this is not merely a matter of passing on our knowledge to others in a post-colonial world which has happened to become globalized, but there is a reflective advantage to those who are teaching in coming to understand the different problems which occur in different settings, in different cultures. Outside my faculty, but within my college, one of my younger colleagues is actively engaged with the development of education in India and with the training of teachers. She does it as a wholly academic study, but as a wholly academic study with a very obvious and very conscious social utility. And I could give many, many more examples. Even in a traditional university like Cambridge, with its centuries-old history of education, the message is spreading that we cannot be isolated from the world and we cannot ignore our own responsibilities within it. Cambridge is not merely an old university, but it is a university which has retained its collegiate structure, within which scholars and students in all the different disciplines can live together and work together. All academic staff and students in all disciplines belong to their departments, be it engineering, law, mathematics, biochemistry, etc. But they belong also to their colleges, and in each college all disciplines are represented. And it is this dual belonging of staff and students that gives Cambridge its special character. As well, this dual belonging gives to Cambridge the possibility of aiming to do something different in and for the world. As well, because of where we are, we have the opportunity of collaborating with different institutions so as to increase the visibility and to increase the effectiveness of what it is that we can do. And I would just like to take a couple of minutes to outline one such collaboration which my college, small college, a modern college, is planning with PolyU. This involves identifying major problems in the world, and in particular in East Asia. The first we have identified, perhaps predictably, is that of air pollution. But we aim that this is just the first of a series of projects. We would then, with the help of PolyU, identify perhaps 8 leading scholars in East Asia in different disciplines and bring them to Cambridge to work within departments in Cambridge according to their own disciplines and also to work with each other within the college. They would be there, we would aim, for a period of several months. And most importantly, they would be away from the demands of their home institutions. Our experience at my college is that providing such an environment gives individuals the time and the space to think. And our belief is that giving groups of scholars the time and space to think alongside each other is a way of harnessing some of the power of human intelligence to gain new insights into complex challenges which the modern world is facing. We are not so confident in ourselves that we believe that we can solve these major problems. But we do believe that the bringing together of experts in different fields and from different places at least gives us the possibility of seeing the problems in a different light and, perhaps we hope, pointing the way towards novel solutions to these problems. We would hope to get this project moving in 2015 to 2016. We are immensely grateful to President Tong for all his encouragement of this project, and in particular to Angie Yuen for all the work that she has put in to help us to realize this possibility. It may prove to be a failure, but I believe passionately that it is only if there is a risk of failure that we will ever achieve serious results in the world. Otherwise, we are simply not being ambitious enough. And lack of ambition may be the biggest risk that universities face as they take on board their social responsibilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ibbotson. Next, we have Professor Amanda McBride.
Excellent. Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm honored to be here today, and in particular, I must thank Angelina Ewan. When I told my colleagues that I was coming here, she's a social worker like me, and they all said, she's one of the greatest social workers in the world. How lucky you are to come here to be with her and to be at an outstanding institution like Hong Kong Polytechnic. I must say I come here humbly. I have been impressed so far with what I have learned today, and we in the US have so much to learn from all the institutions from around the world who are embarking on this important mission. And I'm grateful for this opportunity. I have to say, being on the last panel of the day is itself humbling. I refer to it as the cleanup crew. It's really hard to say anything that is unique or unusual, but since many of us are at research institutions, I will say there will be validity and reliability in my remarks, and that I will actually serve to summarize and highlight key remarks that have been made throughout the day. I also am framing my remarks broadly. I am not necessarily utilizing my own institution as an example, though I will weave that in certain places. Instead, my remarks are framed much more broadly around the mission of higher education and what is actually a movement in higher education overall that's not necessarily specific to any of our one institutions. It's interesting to me that the title for this session actually evokes a call for higher I'm shorter than most, thanks. That this session, the title is Catalyst, Higher Education as a Catalyst for Social Change. So any chemists in the audience? This is risky for a social worker, but I do remember from my high school chemistry class that a catalyst is a substance that speeds up a reaction. But that substance, that catalyst, actually is not changed as a result of the chemical reaction. By extension, in this context, that would mean that higher education is not changing through its engagement. Instead, I want us to think about how we, as higher education institutions, should be changed through this work, and in particular how we can reframe our engagement in the world such that we think of it as both necessary and growth enhancing. We've heard a lot today about how our students are transformed through this process. We need to emphasize how communities are changed, and then also how our institutions can be changed. So with that as my frame, I will address three key aspects of my remarks. One is to map service. We've all talked about service in different ways today. Then the second point is to suggest that the very language we're using is part of the problem in institutionalizing this at our respective institutions. I also want to say that we're not structuring ourselves. We're not organizing ourselves internally then to also advance this mission. The third point then is to propose how do we make service central to 21st century research and teaching such that that service is mutually transforming and impactful. So with that as context, in higher education, we tend to talk about ourselves as doing research, teaching, and service. Three distinct buckets, right? That's part of the problem. We should aim toward greater integration. And even within the field of service, we have three primary areas that have even been talked today across all of the sessions. There's co-curricular service, how our students themselves exert their leadership to define their activity outside of the classroom into the community. The second then is our so-called service learning, where our students are involved in community, but they're doing so under faculty advisement in connection with curriculum and normally for course credit. Then the third, we've heard some about community-based research that our faculty are implementing as part of their scholarship agendas, which may or may not necessarily overlap with their teaching. These are three distinct buckets, and I use the metaphor of sprinkles on the cupcake. These are the photo opportunities that end up on our home pages. This is how we like to talk about our engagement in the community. I think that Each of these three distinct areas have evolved over social, economic, and political contexts to have their own unique arena. But I would argue that what we're talking about here today with the frame of university social responsibility is actually putting service, to extend the metaphor, to the bottom of a three-layer cake, where from our service, our most effective engaged teaching and our most effective engaged research can occur. So with that as kind of background as to when I say service, what I'm talking about, it's across those three primary areas. I'll say that our language has actually been part of the problem, and those of us in the United States that have really advanced this and have pushed the scholarship in this area, I apologize for doing this, because what I think has happened is that we have used service in the context of being of service, which connotes a patronage, that we are there in a charitable act. We have more, you have less, and we are there to give. One of the things I have found, however, is that that very language serves to isolate aspects of my own community and campus. As my institute that I lead is 9 years old, and when we were first charged with promoting service across the university, service learning was one of the first charges. So as I met with the deans across the various schools and the different faculty, I can remember in particular a conversation with the engineering dean and his faculty who said, "We don't do service. We do our work in community, and it's around innovation and change." So I quickly realized I could not refer to my attempts to promote service learning as service learning. It's to promote community-based teaching and learning. I've also, in thinking about the next iteration of the Institute and its evolution, we just completed some market research with faculty, with alumni, with key community leaders and our students. And what came back from our faculty, we tested the concept of service to society. And if they would think of their research in that way, and again, it came back, this is not how they think of the work that they're doing. They're still assessing major problems impacting the human condition and the human experience, but they're not doing it from an orientation of service, to be of service. Instead, it is what they are doing to understand the world around us and to make it a better place. So language matters. The other thing that matters is structure. And I suggest that we actually need to reorganize ourselves on our college campuses. And it's so fascinating, isn't it, to think about all the titles of our presenters today and how they've talked about the way that it's organized on their campuses. If we go back to those three areas of service that I mentioned before, often there's an office of student co-curricular service, there's an office of service learning, and then we have our larger research offices on our campuses that may or may not actually help faculty with their community-based teaching. So right there, we've split ourselves. It's very hard for us then to think about integrating this and then as a university having a larger social responsibility. So instead of more offices, more departments, more vice chancellors, I actually suggest that we should move toward greater centralization. Some of you may have heard recently there's a research university in the United States who just received a $150 million endowment to launch their Engaged initiative. The job description for the founding executive director was just released, and the position is tucked up under a student services vice provost that reports to the provost. And even in the context of that job description, one of the requirements for the position is knowledge of the Microsoft Office products. I say all of that not necessarily to make light of that, but instead to reinforce this point, that if we are to structure ourselves effectively, we need to send a clear signal that this is central to our missions, and then we put all the authority and resources behind it to make it happen. Peter Drucker was a famous scholar of business, and he said, "Structure follows vision. So if our vision is larger university responsibility and to have a larger impact in the world, then we have to be bold enough to restructure our campuses. I will say, I come here emboldened somewhat. Last week, a task force released its report at Washington University that indeed, that is what my university will be doing in this next era. The Office of Student Engagement will now be part of my office, and I will also be able to grow an office of community-based research that collaborates with our Vice Chancellor for Research. I might also add that I report directly to our provost. I cannot convey how much it's been a long 9 years to get to this point, but what it represents for this next era of university social responsibility at my institution is tremendous. So my third and final point today is that we actually make community engagement central, and that we do this from understanding that larger university engagement should be predicated on the external community and its definition of problems and needs. In many ways, this reflects Professor Soon's remarks in the previous panel, in which many of us in the United States refer to as an anchor institution kind of approach. It's the idea that we have resources, we have faculty expertise and knowledge, we have our students' human capital and capacity, and that we should be mobilizing those in service to community-driven issues and challenges. We just heard, actually, this could be organized around grand challenges, climate, other issues in terms of poverty in particular areas. My particular university has focused on urban education as an area where we are suffering in our local community, and we have thrown a lasso then around key school districts, and into those districts now we are funneling our tutoring programs. So we have students who are going and working with those students after school. They are also engaged in mentoring and big brother, big sister type activities. I also have a professional department that's working with the teachers to teach them 21st century skills and knowledge. I have faculty who have National Science Foundation grants who are working on the latest STEM technology and how to teach that at the K-12 level. They're working with the principals and the teachers to roll that out. I also have up to 70 courses across the campus that are working one-on-one with either teachers or principals or superintendents or school districts to actually work on specific projects that need problems solved. What's unique about this, and why I say this should be the kind of era that we move to, is that this is social change. This is not being charitable. This is not being of service. This is recognizing that in this particular context, when students do not graduate from high school, there are social, economic, and political costs that our society must absorb, and graduating from high school is a measurable outcome. That is something that we can say we are committed to changing, and then organizing ourselves to do that. One of the things that institutions that are doing this are seeing, we have not yet, we're 3 years into this experiment, we have not yet seen these benefits, but some campuses that are doing this, they're not only seeing faculty recruitment among their junior faculty, they're drawing people in who want to do this. There's been discussion today, how do we incentivize faculty to do this? It's the next generation that's going to lead this. The younger faculty want to do this. There's also commercialization of innovations that's coming out of this work. So I mentioned the teaching of STEM in high school. There are a number of software products and others that faculty are developing, and their institutions making money off of this. The third is that as more and more primary and secondary institutions teach in a service learning way, in an engaged way, our next undergraduate and graduate students are going to expect us to teach like this and expect our environments to be like this. There is one institution in the United States, Duke University, who has really led this movement, and they're known actually for their sports. But Duke Engage is about 7 years into its work, and just last year, they found out from the freshmen, why did you come to Duke University? No longer do they list sports. They say to be engaged in the community. So when I say we need to make community engagement central to our universities, we can structure our universities in such a way that it's meaningful and beneficial for our students, the community partners that we're working with, as well as our investors in larger institutions. And I might end with this point. I just said that. The next frontier is evaluation and research in this area. If we are going to make this central to our missions, then we must be transparent and accountable to all of those stakeholder groups that I just mentioned, and we have to be open to the risk of failure. But instead of framing it as failure, it's a learning process. If we go as co-partners, not in service, but as co-partners, then we need feedback about how we're performing, how we're actually working with our partners to achieve these outcomes. I think if we move in this direction, we set up these structures around accountability, we have the opportunity to achieve what I refer to as the triple win. It's a win for community, it's a win for our students, and it's a win for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor McBride. And next we have Professor Son.
Thank you very much. I am truly honored to be able to participate in this great conference, and I would also like to thank PolyU and Angie in particular for inviting me to Hong Kong. This is my first time in my life, spending in Hong Kong. It's a shame, but that's the fact. I like to talk about the Yonsei University's experience in the context of university social responsibility. Actually, the University of Social Responsibility is an underdeveloped area in Korea, particularly among the major universities like Yonsei, Seoul, Koryo, and others, where students are so-called study machines. They study hard. They are used to cram work. They are very, very competitive for getting grades. It's very hard to, have them engaged in the community, doing services and things like that. Sometimes you approach that in a way of increasing your value, competitive value, that you have your GPEs and all other things, the language competitiveness, plus social services. So that's very instrumental. That's true. So now the Yonsei University is trying to working toward this university social responsibility, and clearly dedicated to catch up with the schools like PolyU and others, and that's why I'm here, to learn from you. Yonsei University has an experience, I think, distinguished experience in international education. And I believe that you do best in Korea in that sense, and then you create institutions, practices, and then followed by other universities. Sometimes they take advantage of backwardness to excel, and then we do kind of new institutions, international institutions. So I will introduce all these efforts to you, and also talk about the university social responsibility. in that context. So first, I like to talk about the need for international education in Korean society, and how the Korean society respond to that need. And you know, I'll talk about the Yonsei's role in that regard. Some conceptual thing. What is the international? I mean, higher international education. You know, there's roughly 4 areas. One is in terms of student mobility. You know, full study abroad for a foreign degree, students on exchange programs, etc. 2 is academic mobility for, you know, professional development, you know, academic partnerships, things like that. And 3, program mobility, e-learning programs, you know, joint course, joint degrees, things like that. And institutional mobility, you know, there are several universities present here. You do offshore campuses, I mean, including PolyU, and buying also a foreign education institutions in your campus. So in Korea, we have these, you know, 5 stages. You started with public English education, and then your students study abroad, the massive outflow of students, and you know, you attract foreign students inbound. There's an inbound international education institution established, and attract foreign education institutions. And Korea is standing somewhere. Why we you know, care much about international education? Because it increases individual competitiveness in this way. You know, through the international education, better understanding of multicultural, international language proficiency, you learn global manner, international networking, individual diversity, and that leads to national competitiveness. You know, you believe that it includes inducement of foreign skilled labor. You know, institutions, Korean institutions meet international standards. You create international entrepreneurship and global firms open to multicultural society, global leadership, global citizenship, global core, produce global knowledges, etc. So these are the reasons why Korea is really pushing hard to international education. I'll skip this. It is well known that you have a large number of outbound internationalization of education. This is the number of students study abroad. A few years ago, we have, you know, 250,000 students studying abroad. It's a huge number, and it's the largest share of cross-border education in the world. And 2007, you reached the peak and then steadily declining because of the, you know, financial crisis. Then you ask why that happened in Korean society. There's a high demand for international education, you know, for that, I mean, for the reasons that I explained before. You know, strong appetite for education in the post-industrial stage. So, so far the domestic education, people thought that it fit for the industrialization. Now you move on, so you need new education. But domestic educational institutions do not match. So you know, go abroad. Particularly, you know, the early studies abroad students here. Early studies abroad means that in your, you know, middle school, high schools, you go abroad and then continue to college and, you know, graduate schools overseas. So the numbers have been exploded. Then there are criticisms. I mean, some people worried about service trade deficits because so many people are going out. But it is a beneficial brain drain because students eventually come back with greater human capital. There are several points that I want to mention. There's some widespread criticisms regarding this exodus from the Korean schools is that the students are mostly wealthy families, from the wealthy families. And in Korean society, it shows increasingly widening income disparity, and that is really a social and political problem. So this issue has been a political issue. I mean, studying abroad, all these stages has been a political issue in Korean society for the past decade. Saying that study abroad is a symbol of social prestige because you create social networks. I mean, Ivy graduates or some good high school graduates in the United States or UK, they make cliques, social networks, etc. And then those are, these are extremely elite-centered and registered by the resilient egalitarianism widespread in Korean educational society. And another difficulty is those students who finish it, college degrees or post-college, the master's degree, they found difficulty in adjusting to Korean society after you return, because mostly in the field of humanities and particularly social sciences, you are trained with Western knowledges, and now you get back. The society is different. It's a Korean society, and particularly many Korean companies, want so-called organizationally oriented skills rather than universally, universal skills you trained in foreign institutions. So you rather, prefer, domestic, Korean university graduates who are familiar with these organizationally oriented skills, Samsung-oriented skills, Hyundai-oriented skills, and things like that. The question is how to meet this society-wide high demand for international education, but at the same time, you have to address these drawbacks. The solution that Yonsei University tried to find is let's create higher international education institutions in Korea within Yonsei. The inbound internationalization for the purpose of producing world-class research and teaching, international engagement for faculty, curriculum, facilities to equip students, Yonsei students, with high-end knowledge, internationalize organizational culture of the university, and equally important, more accessible to the Korean students. Now, let me briefly, okay, I have about 3 minutes, briefly, introduce Yonsei University because university really asked me to do this. It was founded in 1885, so next year it's an 130th anniversary of the university, established by Christian missionaries, Allen and Underwood. The Yonsei's mission is to foster leaders who will contribute to humanity in the spirit of truth and freedom. This is the campus, the late autumn flavor, you can sense it. This is the next year is the 130 year anniversary, and this part also university asked me to do this. It's world top 220 private university. I was surprised that most of the great universities are public. Government funded or government universities. So you see, IBs and WashU and others, and the Yonsei is there, so it's a good one, and I'm proud. Let me give you 3 examples of international education quickly. Number 1 is the Graduate School of International Studies that was founded 30 years ago. I am currently the dean of this school, so it's Korea's first English language professional school. Half of the students are international, and half of domestic students are returnees. It encourages vibrant intellectual exchanges through its interdisciplinary majors, and your motto is global citizens, global cores, global responsibilities. And for not producing returnees too much, you establish an undergraduate program, which is called Underwood International College. Once again, it's a liberal arts institution, all English taught. You modeled after Ivy League and integrate liberal arts common core that includes social services into disciplinary majors. And number 3, this is the new one. We developed international campus in Songdo back in 2011, and it's been 4 years. We have a new campus, and first year freshmen go to this campus. 4,500 freshmen go to the dorm in this campus, and you spend 1 year. This is Songdo. It's a bustling city, right near Incheon International Airport, and it hosted many international organizations as well. And this is the residential college, holistic education. So it is the first residential college ever created in Korea. You see that because it's a holistic education, you really focused on giving back to the community. You have mentoring programs with the local people, Songdo people, and emphasize service leadership so that you strongly encourage to work on service. Help people in your community. So this is an ambitious program, and we are also considering giving grades for community services in your first year of Yonsei University. So let me conclude. Broadly speaking, this international education efforts by Yonsei University is kind of meeting the demand from the society in terms of the social responsibility, provide more options for the community and benefit students, especially for those in low-income families who cannot support abroad for international education. And it is basically globally oriented and focused on being actively involved in community service. And we are proud of being a model that is being spread to the other major society in Korea. But one thing that I'll skip this part, but you need to develop a better curricular program that serves complex social needs as an East Asian educational center. That means that, you initially modeled after, American institutions, but this is an Asia university, Korean university, so you have to, mix complex these two elements together, making a genuine international education program in Korea. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Young. Next, we have Professor Lee from Stanford University.
Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to be back to Hong Kong. I'm born in Hong Kong, a real Hong Kong boy. Okay, and it's so good to be back. Thanks very much, Angie, and also the host of this so special event. I want to share with you, because I think many of our speakers have shared about different ways to do social change. And Stanford University, being based in the Silicon Valley, we oftentimes thought of ourselves as a way to help people to innovate and to create entrepreneurship. And of course, I think you may know that companies like Google, Yahoo, Hewlett-Packard, and Nike, they were all founded by Stanford graduates. And so we have kind of the DNA of helping students, working with researchers to try to create and innovate. And so one of the ways to do social change, which I'm going to share with you this afternoon, one aspect of social change is poverty alleviation using innovation and entrepreneurship. So this is one aspect. It's by no means with the broad scope of social change that many of my speakers and other fellow panelists have spoken about. This is only one modest aspect. But let me share with you why this is important. I think the whole world, if by the definition of the World Bank in 2009, there are lots and lots of people who are living under so-called extreme poverty. Extreme poverty means that people live on less than US $1.25 a day. And that's lots of them. As a percentage of the population, most of them are in Africa. But, you know, in absolute numbers, the largest population that live under extreme poverty, number one is India, and number two is China. And that is ironic, as we all recognize China is becoming wealthier and wealthier, but in fact, the number of people living under extreme poverty is huge. What can we do? Now, of course, the World Bank, United Nations, Gates Foundations, there are many organizations that are helping them by giving them free food, free water, free medicines, or low-cost medicines. But we, as an academic institution, cannot afford to give them free food, free medicine. What we can do, however, is to help them to innovate with new business models, with new way of doing things, with new partnerships, with new relationships. And I think that's the kind of things that we as researchers and as students can collaborate with the local entities so that they would be able to get out of this poverty trap. And they will be able to employ more people. They'll be able to increase the values through exports. And I think that's the way that we can approach. Now, how can we create values? So I have a simple way, because this is the late afternoon, I can expect you to remember very little about what every one of us have spoken. So I would make it simple, and that there are three ways. I think there's all three ways. The first one is to provide basic needs. We can innovate by creating things that is affordable and also accessible to them. I often told my students is that many students, when they look at China, and there are a lot of sanjai, you know sanjai. Those of you who are not from China may not know what is sanjai. But sanjai, many people thought that sanjai is awful. They are illegal, they're pirates, they are piracies. But sanjai is a great example for us to study, because they are able to identify the underserved population, and oftentimes they're able to innovate with very fast product developments, low-cost manufacturing, and they were able to distribute to the underserved market. So we do the same thing. We have a course at Stanford which requires the D school, the design school, and the business school to collaborate to create extremely affordable products to serve the needs. But products is not sufficient. We have to find a way to distribute and deliver. And one of the projects that I was involved in the last 4 years is a project about the use of motorcycles to serve the villagers in Africa. 60% of the population in Africa live in villages that have no access to paved roads. So if you want to have a car to bring the doctor or the nurse or have the patient to go to the clinic, no way. Here is a picture about a young mother carrying a baby and walked 4 hours to the nearest clinic. And so the infant mortality rate is huge. What can we do? It turns out that working with an NGO called Riders for Health, we pour in academic researchers and students from engineering school, medical school, statistics, and the business school to help them to use motorcycles. Motorcycles is great because they can go where cars or four-wheel vehicles cannot, and they are less vulnerable to corruption. You know, if many countries, many car companies, Honda, donated, if you donate vehicles to the countries, half of them would be taken by the corrupt officials. But motorcycles, the ministers do not like to ride on motorcycles. They like to have a driver to drive them. So it's a great way, corruption-proof. And here is a picture where by working together, doing the right maintenance, doing the right logistic support, we were able to send this nurse. This is a nurse, the man, the guy in white, was a nurse to be able to visit villages, to be able to visit children, and that really made a difference. The difference is there were villages that were never visited by nurses, and now they do have access. And this also provides equity in healthcare. Equity so that the poor and the needed can be covered. The second way is to what I call enhancing and sustaining the value chain by strengthening the bases. So this time we're not serving them, but this time we're helping them so that their value add would be improved. How so? Let me give you an example. Is that those of you who have been to Ghana may know that Ghana is a very poor country in West Africa. It's very poor. It's ranked, GDP ranked 209 out of 229 countries in 2009. But amazingly, this country has lots of shea butternuts. It's very easy to grow shea butternuts in Africa. They're just well endowed with growing nuts. But the people are poor. Why? Because you can imagine, if you grow nuts and you want to sell to your neighbor says, thank you, I also have nuts. Everybody has nuts. So there's no way you can make much money. But also the major problem is that many of the farmers were single mothers, poor single female farmers. And the farmers were poor, and sometimes when they have sick children at home, and they have to go to the hospital, and they don't have money, no cash, what do? You mortgage your crop. There are loan sharks that would come in and say, okay, give me the crop, premature, the crop is not ready, but they would be willing to buy it at very, very low cost. And then you get by. But because now you lost your crop. And when the crop is ready to be harvested, it doesn't belong to you. So you are forever poor. So what we did is to work with the local multiple organizations. It turns out the approach is using the right mobile technologies to give them information, to help them with microfinancing, to train them, to help them to grow nuts that would be of high quality, appetizing, sanitized, so that they would be able to be sold to the outside world. Because then you make money. Don't sell it to your neighbor. Sell it to the outside world. More, don't sell it as food. I think my lady friends here would know that the best cosmetics is made by shea butter. I don't know, but my wife knew, and he told me that. And by doing so, you increase the value add of the shea butter farmers. And that is how we're able to lift people out of poverty. Now, this is what it is. This is really to help them innovate through business process, innovate through business models. And I think we can work using researchers and students jointly to do that. The third one, which I think is a very exciting one, is to create new business model, changing from a traditional business model to a new business model with innovations. And I'll use the example of hazelnuts in Bhutan. This is a cover page of the Asia Forbes magazine, and it talks about Bhutan. Now, most of us know that Bhutan has a happiness index. They were very happy. They're a happy nation. But this happiness index is threatened. The country is threatened. Why? Because the farmers are so poor, they could not make a living. When they could not make a living, many of the male left Bhutan to work in India and other countries as migrant workers. And they were so poor that they could not go back home unless it's a long, long time. So most families grew up without fathers. How can a country be happy when most of the families children grow up without fathers at home. So this is a threatening of the happiness index. And the only way is to find a crop that can be grown in Bhutan with good income for the farmers so that they can come back and make a living. And this fellow, Daniel Spitzer, a graduate of Stanford, had the idea. And he says that I can help them to grow hazelnuts. Because he knew, he lived in Bhutan. After graduation, he went there as a Peace Corps. And so he knew that this is a wonderful, wonderful country with the right climate, the right weather to grow hazelnuts. And hazelnut is a well-loved crop. The world is short of hazelnuts. They're only grown in Turkey. They only grow in maybe US, Italy. Not enough, especially the Chinese is buying lots and lots of hazelnuts. So we should introduce hazelnut in Bhutan. But the problem is the following. You cannot just simply say, well, I'll grow hazelnut, I'll sell it to the farmers. And the farmers sell the tree, baby tree, the nursery tree in Yunnan. And then you sell the tree to the farmers, grow hazelnut. Number one is that the farmers cannot afford to buy even the baby trees. Number two is that the farmer says that I don't know how to grow hazelnut. This is not an easy crop. I don't know how to do it. I don't trust that I can do it. No confidence. And so what Daniel Spitzer did is to create a company, and we work with him. Many students have gone to Bhutan to work with him, and as well as graduates, to create a business model. The business model is that you give the baby trees to the farmers free. Don't ask them to buy. Even $1 per tree is too much. Free of charge. When they grow the tree, you collect the crop, and then the farmers will sell it to you. So the farmers retain ownership. And number two is that you have to help the farmers how to grow. The best thing is to give them a mobile phone. A mobile phone would enable them to teach them, today you need more irrigation. Tomorrow this is the right time to do fertilization. Wow, wonderful. And of course, once the farmer has a mobile phone, they don't just need to use the mobile phone for only one thing. And we gave the mobile phone and developed a lot of apps for the mostly girls in Bhutan, so that they would be able to use the phone to do self-expression, to increase their confidence. Yes, selfie type, yeah, but of course it's more than selfie. So they would be able to make video of themselves doing things, playing games, and it's really marvelous, educational. 25% of the profits of this company would go back to the community. And this is one way to earn the trust of the local communities, that they're not another foreign company coming in and exploit. At full scale, it's not yet full scale yet, we think that we can get 15% of the working population in Bhutan growing hazelnuts. It's wonderful. This is one way. So business model change. So here is a picture of one of my students who went to summer. I used this picture to recruit more students. I told the students that, look, yeah, you go there for 1 month and you can do that too. I got lots of applicants. Students says that, yeah, this is wonderful, cool, yeah. So this is the way. I think that business process innovations, idea generations, models is the way to do. There are 3 ways. Now, how can we do that now in the poor countries besides this single project here and there? We were very fortunate that in 2011, November, exactly 3 years ago, a couple by the name of Robert and Dottie King donated $150 million to Stanford to set up an institute to say, okay, duplicate innovation, duplicate entrepreneurship in the developing economies. So we formed this institute called Innovation in Developing Economies. Now here is an interesting side thought that I want to share with you. Is that at first, when somebody gave you $150 million, I think they have a right to ask you to name the institute after him or her, isn't it? If I, Hao Li, donated $150 million to PolyU, maybe I say, well, call it Hao Li Institute. That's a very natural thing. But here comes the problem. If we call it the King, because his name is King, so you call it the King's Institute. Sounds grand, right? Royal, wonderful. But imagine, what are the people that you are serving? You're going to Africa, the poor, poor nations. The king's coming. Oh, imperialism again. Colonialism again. So that's bad. I was humbled totally when Mr. King and Mrs. King, both very devoted Christians, and they said, don't use my name. Because in Africa, nobody knows who's King, Robert King. And they know Stanford. So that's why I was just almost could not sleep about thinking, what could I do to minimize the impact of kings in the name? So today I don't need to use the king because he asked me not to use the king. So it's called Stanford Institute of Innovation and Developing Economies. So last year, 2013, we opened a center in Accra, West Africa. And that picture is the newspaper in Ghana, and that picture was the opening ceremony, with the ambassador, US ambassador being there as well. We opened the center because we want to work with the entrepreneurs in West Africa, Ghana, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, Ivory Coast, to help them to scale, use innovation to scale and employ more people. To our delight, many of these entrepreneurs that we work with says that that's what we want to contribute. When I'm successful, I would be helping my other fellow entrepreneurs to scale as well. What did we do? Well, we set up a center, a very modern center with the Stanford name, as a campus, small campus in West Africa. And then we have faculty going there to run immersion programs to train them, design thinking, innovation, organization, leaderships, and so on. But we ask the entrepreneurs to give us 6 months to work with them. Because there's no way that you can just go there for 1 week and expect magic to happen. There's no way that you can send a group of students there for 1 week and say, okay, after that week you are different companies. No, this is ridiculous, and this is not what one should do. In fact, sometimes students going there is an inconvenience for them, because students don't know much too. So we don't want to just send students. What we do is that we ask alumni. I think in the earlier panel, I was delighted that several of the panelists talk about the importance of continuing with alumni. We got alumni. We asked alumni, they said that, look, who would be willing to go to Africa as a volunteer worker? Of course, I don't expect a young 30-year-old to go because you have a young family. So most of them were retired alumni. But they have experience in startup. They have experience in working in India, working in developing world. That's the kind of people we want. And we have lots of people applying. Again, we also have to look at, would their experience fit the need? If you're an investment banker, maybe not. Yeah, maybe not. So we need people who really have built enterprises and know how to work with people to build a scalable operation. And we were able to get many applicants. This is really, again, out of a completely unexpected. We thought we have to plead and back, but the world is full of wonderful people. The alumni came and applied. So we have to screen them and select them. All we do is to pay them their passage, living expenses, no salary. And the commitment is to go there for 6 months. Now we find that 6 months is not enough. Actually, we are asking them to go 9 months. But again, amazingly, is that a few of these alumni says that I'm a Christian. I usually do short-term mission anyway, 1 month in the summer, and then you're asking me to go 6 months. I can do it. I'm retired. My children are all grown up. This is hallelujah to us. So we were able to find a number of the alumni, and they become coaches and to coach entrepreneurs. But what is great is that once they're there, because they're experienced, they know the company now, then we can send students. Because now students have somebody to be coaching them too. So that they have somebody, because the faculty cannot go there all the time. And that requires this type of setup with summer interns for the students. And then we also, I think earlier in the panel, we talked about maybe not everyone, not every student want to work in this social change environment. Some may want to work later, after they become older alumni, retired alumni, that's fine. But we also created the fellowship to say, if you want to go, we pay for the first year of salary, then you go and work for the companies. And if it doesn't fit, if you decided after 1 year that, this is not right for me, it's fine. The commitment is 1 year. And some students love it because some of them actually wanted to make it as a long-term career, but at least they can try and experiment. And some also wanted to just use 1 year and then they would move on to work on other fields. That's fine too. So this is really the way we want to engage faculty and students, alumni, with the entrepreneurs. And the kind of things that we teach is how to do product and service innovations, how to do leadership, and how to develop the company strategies and supply chain logistics so that you can export, you can ship things around. And we are currently working with 60 companies, and the new batch of 30 will start next month. Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Ivory Coast, and Ghana. Most of them some of them are information communication technologies, food and nutrition products, water, irrigation, manufacturing services, and health services. Here is a picture about my colleague who is teaching design thinking from the D School with the students. We gave them a red shirt because that's a Stanford color, yes, so that they would also be helping to promote our school. Brainstorming, working together. These are the entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, working at Breakout, working on projects together. And then this is myself teaching in front of them. And of course, I make them laugh, just important to make sure that it's lively. So this is all of the actions. This is the first batch, because we now have second batch, and next month we'll have the third batch of the entrepreneurs with the faculty. This is the first batch of pictures. Now these are the first five alumni. They're wearing suits not because that's how you work with the entrepreneurs there. It's simply because this is at the opening ceremony when the ministers came and you have to dress up for the ministers. But these are wonderful people. I am completely humbled by how loving these people are, and they were willing to donate 6 months of their time working. And the great thing is, as a result, the student projects are much better, much, much better than just purely faculty long distance advising them. So we emphasize on the ground action. That's social change projects. Education research has to be on the ground, and we want to do it in the way, and which is an experiment. I was telling Roy earlier is that this is a small step, a small experiment. We have some setback, all kinds of setback and mistakes that we made. The setback, of course, is last month when Ghana asked us not to come because of Ebola. And it was a real threat because we don't want to send students and faculty and alumni there and have them exposed. But we trust that God would overcome this. There are resistances and all kinds of things that make it difficult for our journey. But I hope that, in fact, the current plan is that if it's only Stanford alumni, it is still a small set. We're not a big school. So our next year is to open to all alumni in the rest of the world. If you have a heart, if you have the right skill set, if you have the right experience, partner with us and go to these countries. Our next center will most likely be in Cape Town, in South Africa, followed by Nairobi, East Africa. And then, by that time, I hope to come to Asia. We have to come to Asia, could be India, could be some part of Asia, and Angie has already promised me that she will support if I go to China with her strong network and setup and resources. So this is what we have learned, and I want to share with you about this exciting journey that we have. The journey is a big one, a long one, but it's the first step that we have taken, and I'm excited about being able to share with you this small step. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Lee. You're the only professor who went under your time limit, so I congratulate you. Okay, I'm sure as we've heard, what was shared today covered quite a wide spectrum, different perspectives, different angles on this topic of higher education as catalyst for social change. Before, and I do have a few questions here that's been submitted. Before we actually go into those questions, I'm going to use my privilege as a moderator to sort of fire off a few comments and a couple questions myself first, if I may. First, just to sort of recap, I think what I've heard, at least today, first, again, in the order of the speakers, there was an affirmation of the role and responsibility of the higher education institutions to serve as catalysts for social change. So that's a confirmation, I think, of the topic. And Professor Ibbotson framed it very nicely, going back to the history, the origins of many of the top universities in the world. And followed after that, what Professor McBride shared was identifying, I guess, the language and the framework that is currently being used, I guess it's somewhat being problematic, if maybe inadequate in conveying the sort of right message, how to think about how to communicate, and therefore how to design and execute ways to impact society positively. Of course, there's much more in that, but I'm just sort of highlighting some of the points that I took away. Professor Son then described some of the challenges, another layer, another dimension of issues in particular that he has encountered that really stems from more the social cultural background and how to put the proper emphasis on social responsibility within that context. And bearing in mind the different needs and preferences of the various stakeholders, being the students, being the teachers, and maybe even the parents, because a lot of pressure actually comes from, I'm sure, the parents, very similar across Asia, I think, in that sense. And finally, Professor Lee was very kind to share how to leverage, in particular, innovation, which is a very key trait, I guess, of the Stanford culture, to engage and effect positive change in areas of need. So given all that, I guess I'm interested because I'm the least, so I'm sure of the experts in this room. I have very little knowledge, in fact, so I'm very keen to learn. Values, right, and the goals. Social change. In fact, one of the questions that was submitted is, okay, social change towards what end? Towards what goal? What are the acceptable goals and what are not? There seem to be some assumptions made as we share that is sort of universally understood, but I question whether that is true. Who sets the agenda? Okay, even philanthropy, giving back, transforming. I think these are very positive words, but the devil's in the details, right? When you bring it down to specific areas, specific communities, specific cultures, specific needs, what's the best way to address that? And what if there are disagreements? I don't know if that is a question that maybe one of the panel members, all of you, can maybe share some comments. Professor McBride, do you care to?
Thank you. I take a community-based approach to this. I think that was implicit in my message that community really should be a key driver, but us as partners. I think instead the locus has been from within the university, and so I'm suggesting this shift. I think that who determines the agenda and then how that's structured exists in this space of co-production or co-creation, and that in the best partnerships you are transparent, both of you, about what it is that you will get out of this. When you're not transparent, then you're off on the wrong foot right from the beginning. That transparency then should be backed up with milestones and benchmarks of how you will move toward achieving those goals, and documenting then how you're implementing those processes and any course corrections that need to be made along the way. I do think that increasingly each of our stakeholder groups is looking for that social return on investment, and I'll just use parents as one of those stakeholder groups. We're increasingly seeing in the United States that higher education is being called on the carpet for what does it generate besides just maybe good ethics in our students. Where's the employability aspect? So, for example, being clear that parents, as those who pay tuition, are stakeholders in this process. And if that's one of the outcomes that they are expecting, not just a liberal arts orientation, but the employability of their students, then that should be a factor in how we structure student learning in partnership with community.
That's very interesting, because my interpretation of what Professor Son was saying, in fact, is the opposite extreme of that, where whether it be parents or students themselves are more concerned about, okay, how is this going to facilitate my career, my professional success, how am I going to place better, and whether at the next institution or place of employment. Professor Son, do you have any comments on that?
Well, that's yeah. You said that there are multiple stakeholders in this case. That students, parents, teachers, alumni who really care. I mean, sensitive to the prestige of your schools. So I think, I mean, generally speaking, it could be the complex of these all stakeholders. But obviously, I think yes, demands from the parents are important, but at the same time, their demands are coming from the competitive process of recruiting and job hunting. But at the same time, university has a responsibility to educate them because this social services actually in Korea in your middle school, these are the requirements for graduation. Because of that, and also some of the high schools you require because university is counted as one requirement for admission. In that sense, those social services are very much instrumentalized. Sometimes you buy certificates, things like that. So I think it is the university who really has to design, good ways to evaluate people. I mean, how much you are motivated, genuinely motivated to the social services and things like that. So I think it's both ways to, formulate, the programs. I think, yeah, that may be my reaction.
Professor Ebbison, one question for you. You stated very clearly that at the beginning, again, the origins of many of the top universities, including Cambridge, is to transform society for the better and to give back. How has that changed today? I mean, I guess by your sharing, it has not changed, but the reality versus the ideal. Is there a gap there that you see today?
Of course, yes. But I think it's changing. If we go back to the foundation of the university, of all the universities, so much of it was dominated by the church and with the church's agendas. What we have now is a multiplicity of agendas. We will do different things. Not all of them will be successful. Probably not all of them will be desirable. But there are so many things we can do that simply to say we shouldn't do things because we might do something which is not approved of or turns out not to be desirable isn't really an option. Of course, we have history behind us, and the universities did develop along a different model through the 18th, 19th, and into the 20th century, and we have to redress that balance. So it is different today from what it would have been in 1200. Of course it's different today, but I think we're moving back in the same direction.
Is there a deliberate process to effect that, or is it just a part of natural development in the next phase of history?
If it's a deliberate process, I can't see where the deliberate process is being driven from.
Right.
I think there is a strong idea that I see in leading universities that one ought to be giving back to the community, but I don't see that being driven. There seems to be no governmental pressure behind it. If anything, one of the problems that we have is resisting governmental pressure to force people simply to concentrate on what is no doubt their very valuable research and not on things that have practical utility.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go through some of these. I shouldn't monopolize the time. One of the questions here is asking about challenges or difficulties in promoting cross-disciplinary service learning subjects within the university. Professor Lee, you mentioned that you had engaged members from different faculties, from statistics to economics, business school, engineering, and so on. can you describe or share your experience there?
One of the interesting things at Stanford University is that this is the university governance, that if you want to do research, you set up a research center. But an institute is one that must cross multiple disciplines and multiple schools. So this is kind of Stanford's way of saying this is something so important that you have to cross multiple disciplinary. So in a way that the university is asking us to say, hey, this field of poverty alleviation cannot be solved by the business school, cannot be solved by just the engineering school or the medical school. So we have to engage everyone. So that's number one. But number two is that what I found is that if I go to my medical school colleague and try to encourage them to work with me, it's very hard. But if there is a common problem presented to them, and then we will take them, in fact, we fund the faculty to go to Ghana together, travel, then the incentive would automatically be there because they look at that problem as a big problem and they were excited and they know that they can contribute. And so that collaboration becomes easy. So I think that is great to be able to first identify the problem and excite the faculty with that problem, as opposed to just go and say, hey, let's work on something. I like you, why don't we work together? And that would never work, I found. Yeah, so defining problem, exploring problem first will be one first step. And the good thing is that our institute is willing to invest in providing the resources for people to go and do fact-finding. And so we encourage them is that even if you don't have a research idea, you want to go to Nairobi, go. So that's a powerful way for them to learn about what's out there.
So what I'm hearing is an issue-based approach,
yes,
right, to bring in collaboration. Professor McBride, you had talked about even changing structure to follow the vision, right, or quoting from Drucker. Do you think this issue-based approach works, or do you have other ideas?
Actually, we have a very similar model at Washington University where institutes are university-wide, and my institute is one of those. There have been 3 key issues that the university has identified as problems that we have assets within our institution. We have expertise, and we have interest in our students. I mentioned urban education as one example. Innovation and entrepreneurship is the second, really connected to economic development and poverty. And then the third is public health. From that, and just to give some tangible examples, our provost's office then offered very large grants, $50,000 teaching grants. And here, the carrot was for the deans. It wasn't necessarily for the collaborating faculty, but the expectation of the grant was that 2 or more disciplines came together to address an issue under one of those categories. And then from that, the dean was able to pay other people to teach the classes that those faculty would normally teach in this area. And I'll just give one example of the trajectory that this carrot led to. One of the courses was around aging and the issues impacting societies worldwide connected to education in particular. And how do we educate social workers, architects? How do we get urban planners to think about developing communities that are aging friendly, this sort of thing? I am so delighted for this. This is now open to all freshmen at our university, and there is a service learning component where they complete projects then across, there's multiple disciplines represented, so you have one team that may have a social work student, a psychology student, an occupational therapy student, someone from the architecture school, and then they're working with a community partner to analyze whatever issues that are facing them in the role of aging. And I can just give one example. The Cardinals, St. Louis Cardinals baseball, they had seen a drop-off in the number of older adults who were coming to Cardinals games. So this group of students then worked with the Cardinals organization to look at accessibility, to look at lighting, to look at other supports that could be available to increase the attendance of older adults at baseball games. I just give that as an example because, again, how do we institutionalize this? We need resources in place. We need staff support. There's a large team of staff from my office who are working with the faculty that are teaching this course, but then it's producing tangible outcomes for our community partners.
Very good. Another question here is to do with evaluation. I guess my question would be how does one successfully evaluate many of these programs? But the question here actually is this evaluation issue unique to service learning, or is it a need across university teaching research programs? I'll give you guys a choice to answer either how to evaluate or to answer this question of whether this is a unique situation with service learning programs or not, or both. Anyone care to give it a shot?
No, it's not at all. We have a pretense in the modern universities that we can evaluate things by putting numbers on them as if those numbers represented realities. And so much of the time you need to exercise judgment over the quality of things, and you have to back your own judgment. And we see it, at least in the UK, everywhere in the universities, that there is this pseudo-evaluation going on, which is not real evaluation. And I think we just have to back our own opinions, back our own judgments, and listen to others, of course.
Is that a sentiment shared by the other panelists?
It's not. Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
So evaluation itself is a very, very difficult subject, and we have to face with that all the time, because I think the donors, especially donors, also expect you to evaluate and give us the indicators, the performance indicators, so that my money is well spent. So what we did is that we have to, first is to make sure that we understand the clock speed of our intervention. It's not like we go there for 1 week and the students come back and you expect things to change. We're there for a long haul, and when it's a long haul, you measure things differently. The measures, there would be some short-term measures, but overall you want to look for longer-term impacts. So the time horizon of measurement is important. The second one is that what we found is when you go in, before you go in, you design the performance measure first. Because oftentimes, like we work on this Riders for Health motorcycle projects, and Sonali is in the audience, my colleague. We designed the performance measure with the Gates Foundation because they gave us a multi-million-dollar grant to do this project. And we put in place the performance measures before we launched the project. Because otherwise, if you go back afterwards and say, hey, what did we do well, and you did not put the measurement instruments in place, and you won't be able to get a meaningful measure. And the third way is that now we learn that actually there are people, researchers, whose research is in performance evaluation. So we engage them and say, why don't you use us, our program, as your test subject, so that you evaluate it for us and it becomes your research, and it's much better. And those people love to do this. There is a real test bed for them. There is a real engagement on the ground, and they have good research. And by default, we also get something measured for us. So it's really not easy, but I think we are doing it in step-by-step, multi-dimensional ways. Yeah.
Thank you. Professor McBride, you're nodding your head.
I agree completely. I think one aspect of evaluation that's valuable in this process when you take a partnership approach is the process evaluation, the actual implementation assessment of this. And one thing we've done with our service learning courses across campus is that all community partners then at the end of the semester receive a survey, and they give us immediate feedback about the process. Was it clear? Did they get good communication? What was the quality of the product that was received? Would they recommend any other community organizations to actually work with us? We're working on a 90% recommendation right now. And then we follow up 6 months later. Did you actually use the information? What's the sustainability of the services that have been provided, that sort of thing? And then if not, why not? What was it about the partnership or the product that was delivered that was not a good fit? We then utilize that information, taking it back to our faculty so that we're constantly course correcting. It's not just about outcomes, it's about the process as well.
Thank you. I think we're just about up with our time. I think why don't we just invite all of you to approach panel members. I'm sure they would be happy to address any further questions or more specific questions you may have after the session. I think we're now coming to the end of the day. I'm going to ask all of us to just put our hands together, give them a warm thank you for their valuable insights. And invite them to step off the stage. I'm going to ask Angie and Professor Ye to come up and give us the concluding remarks. Thank you very much.